I feel a chill. Welcome back for those of you returning from part 1, and thank you for joining me again as we really crack this case open. If you didn't see my last video, I highly recommend you watch it, as this video is based off of many of the points I made in that one. What we did is we analyzed the End's dialogue word for word until we came up with a bit of a solid idea of its origin. Now that we have that understood, we're finally going to finish this. I present to you the End's full backstory. The End forged itself somehow. We aren't entirely sure how, but we know it was made as a spirit of absolute order, one to purify the universe. The End was having fun destroying planets until it ran into the Ancients. It saw that they had somehow collected the Chaos Emeralds from across the universe. This was perfect. All the emeralds were gathered in one place. The chaos that had opposed it for so long was about to be drowned out. The End destroyed their planet in one slash, but the Ancients managed to escape with the emeralds. The End turned around and decided to follow them to their new home, Earth. Once the End arrived, it and the Ancients battled. It was not just it against the Ancients, though. The End was battling the very thing that stood against it in every way. The End was the spirit, the embodiment, and the ultimate power of order. The Master Emerald was the exact opposite, being the embodiment of chaos itself. The End had to win now. Everything was gathered together in one place. If it could destroy the planet, it could destroy everything. The Ancients were more prepared this time, though. Even in just 20 years, they had constructed the 4 Titans in order to combat the End. This was no problem, though. They were tiny compared to it. The Titans didn't stand a chance against the End, except for one. Supreme Perseus. He could take a harder hit, and his attacks, though nothing more than a paper cut to the End, were slowly doing damage. The End had to get rid of him. There was no way around it. As for the Titans, they had no choice but to keep fighting. The End almost won. It got this close to eliminating everything in its way. It launched attacks against all of the Starfall Islands, as well as countless other places in the world, even if the Ancients were the only intelligent species in that area. But in the end, there was just one thing that stopped it. Perseus. With his willpower combined with the power of chaos, he managed to fuse the End to his Titan. The End couldn't believe what was happening. It squirmed and fought and did everything it could to prevent itself from being pulled in, but this power was too strong. How had the power of just one Chaos Emerald evolved so much over the course of just 20 years? No, it wasn't the Emerald. Perseus's will was the thing that was strong enough to force it into him. The End thought about this for just a second. Part of it did, at least. How could a life like this even exist? Something so unbelievably insignificant somehow had the power to combat a god. The End simply brushed it off as just a fluke, a horrible, irreversible, world-shattering fluke. The End tried to move, but its body was gone. All it had for a body was supreme. Perseus had sacrificed his life to seal it, and this unfortunately worked. The other 3 Titans attacked, and though the End tried to fight back, it was no match for them. The Ancients burned their souls in order to seal the End within cyberspace. The warriors did. The other Ancients left for Angel Island to keep their species alive. The seal wouldn't last forever. Even with the power of the entire species, millennia later the seal would wear off. So they instead had a failsafe. The Chaos Emeralds could produce endless energy. When the seal they placed over the End wore off, the emeralds would shoot back to the Starfall Islands and power the seal in their place. The End was furious, but there was nothing it could do. It just had to accept what had happened. It was now in cyberspace, along with the Guardians and the Titans, stuck in a body that wasn't its own, and a world that it wasn't its own, surrounded by nothing but the memories of the people it hated, of the people that led to its downfall. That damned Ancient. The End was entirely alone. It was together, but it was alone. It went into hibernation. It's not documented how long the End stayed like this. Centuries, likely even millennia, had passed as it slept. One day, far, far into the future, a sign came to the End, causing it to partially wake. The usage of the Phantom Ruby was connecting cyberspace to the real world. Though the End couldn't escape or affect anything, it got a glimpse into the outside world a few times. It was confused, intrigued, and a little bit excited. Then, that moment ended. and it went silent again. The End was disappointed, but could feel the age of the seal. It was only a matter of time before it all came to ruin. It went back into hibernation. Later, in its hibernation, the End had a dream about a white-hot eagle that annihilated the universe and everything inside of it. It was a pleasant dream, but couldn't have been anything more than that. A few short years passed, and the signal came once again. The signal was to a much higher degree this time. It was coming from more than one source, too. Well, kind of. It all seemed to be coming from one mother source, with several littler sources coming from that power as well. The End used these glimpses of information to create an idea of what had happened. Someone had managed to find one of the last surviving sources of cyberspace, the Phantom Ruby. His name was Dr. Eggman. Another being named Infinite had also been using the Phantom Ruby. They had some silly conquest over the world running. The End didn't care about any of that, but then had a plan. The End realized that if this doctor cared so much about conquest, that he would likely do anything to get more power. So it began to lay a trap. Midway through, though, the signal was cut off. A being named Sonic had destroyed the Phantom Ruby. Sonic. That name. That face. He seemed so familiar to the End. It didn't matter. It would deal with him later. Now that the signal was cut off, though, the End had no choice but to fire off a signal randomly and pray that someone would find it. Luckily for it, this trap worked, and the End was able to lure Dr. Eggman right inside. Now that cyberspace had been breached, the End could see everything around the Starfall Islands. Coincidentally, this happened to be the same time that the ancient seal had worn off. The Chaos Emerald shot back to the Starfall Islands as a response to hold the seal in place. This lured Sonic and his friends into the islands. The End realized it could use Sonic to defeat the Titans for it, and then had him shut down cyberspace so it could be free. It began manipulating him, and it worked. There was an issue, though. Perseus' sacrifice. The one thing that had gotten it into this mess in the first place was still affecting it to this day. The End was still fused to Supreme. There had to be something it could do to escape, though. It did everything it could, but was still stuck in the body of this Titan, until it was once again challenged by Supersonic. Supersonic unknowingly was able to release it from its fusion with Supreme. The End was freed, but now horribly weakened. Sonic and Sage went against it, and it knew it couldn't win. Part of the End fought, but the other half knew of the dangers and left. Now only one question remains. Who are the two halves of the End? It makes sense that it's the Spirit of Order, but this feels so familiar. There has to be something else related to it. Well, my dear viewer, it is. The End, no, part of the End, is the reincarnation of Mephiles. Okay, wait, listen, let me explain. The darkness, the End's ideology, everything, it all feels like Mephiles. Obviously, I have better evidence than that, so let's take a closer look. First of all, would Sega even do this? They said that Mephiles was a one-off villain and wouldn't be returning in the series. While this is true, Sega has actually used him and hinted at a possible return before. First, we have the Time Eater. The Time Eater is a really interesting creature, and there's not much to it. We know that Eggman didn't make it, but rather found it out in the middle of space after his defeat in Colors. We also know it didn't have much of a consciousness. This allowed Eggman to control it pretty easily. Because of its time manipulation skills and its association with the darkness, many people believe that it's a fragment of Mephiles that was scattered across the universe after the death of Solaris. This is not the only fragment of Solaris that we see scattered across the universe. We also know of the reincarnation of Iblis, the Ifrit, from Sonic Rivals 2. This beast has a lot more solid connections to Iblis than the Time Eater does. Not only does it look almost identical to Iblis, but it's also the reason Silver exists in the modern series. While in Sonic 06, Silver's future was ruined by Iblis, in Sonic Rivals, Silver's future was ruined by the Ifrit. So yeah, Ifrit is almost certainly the reincarnation of Iblis. Crisis City is also a playable stage in the Generations. This is odd considering that Crisis City should have totally been erased from the timeline after the events of 06, yet here it is, alive and well again. One fan theory is that it got sealed in white space long before the Time Eater event came to pass and has always been there, meaning that part of the timeline from 06 may have been brought back. I don't know how much I believe this theory, but it's certainly out there. For the canon IDW comics, there's another possible connection to Mephiles. There's a cut character from the IDW comics that looks shockingly similar to Mephiles. Obviously, cut characters should never be considered canon, but this shows that Sega has considered reviving Mephiles in some form before. The most recent showing of Mephiles outside of Frontiers was released just a month before. He was released as a playable character in the obscure mobile game Sonic Forces Speed Battle. Though this game isn't even remotely canon, it shows that Sega hasn't forgotten about our favorite little purple bean boy. Now, let's look at the ties in Sonic Frontiers. First of all, the End's ideology and manipulation tactics are very similar to Mephiles, especially when you consider that Mephiles never wanted to be God. He just wanted to consume everything. The similarities don't stop there, though. Mephiles in his true form has this smoky purple aura around him. We see a very similar aura around Sage, and more notably, the End. The End's deep and brooding masculine voice is also very similar to that of Mephiles. There's also the fact that the End's masculine half literally uses dark attacks. While Mephiles isn't the only boss associated with darkness, unless you want to make the argument that this shit is Dark Gaia, then I think he's the best candidate. You know what? I'm open-minded. Go ahead. Tell me. I don't care. So how did this happen? How did Mephiles end up as part of the End after the events of Sonic 06? While Iblis got sent to the future and the Time Eater got sent to the present, Mephiles got sent far into the past. With the Time Eater separated from him, he was stuck there. His only hope was to wait for Solaris to reappear in his world so he could combine with him once more. As he was wandering the universe, he ran into the Spirit of Order, a woman who was so obsessed with being God that she would do anything. A spirit who was constantly being defeated by the Master Emerald. Mephiles saw her passion, and realized he could manipulate her into giving him more power. The two gods fused, creating the End. Unfortunately for Mephiles, his hopes of fusing with Solaris again were destroyed once he was sealed in cyberspace. Once he was free again, he knew that there had to be an opportunity to become Solaris once again. That's the last thing that supports this theory. Mephiles knows when to retreat. He does so whenever Omega, Shadow, and Rouge team up with him in Wave Ocean. He goes to the Dusty Desert in order to truly prepare for their attack. That's the thing. The reason that the masculine voice disappears during the End's final attack is because Mephiles knows that he can't win. So when Sage killed the Spirit of Order, Mephiles survived. He couldn't pass up an opportunity for freedom again. I'm sure you know what this means. Mephiles is still alive right now. He's out there in the universe, planning his next move. After all these years, he's finally back. A little worse for wear, but back. I know that there are a lot of holes in this theory, and most of you won't agree with me, and that's fine. That's why I'm super excited for the new story update of Sonic Frontiers, as well as the sequel, whatever form it may take. Now, is this the end for the Sonic Theory saga for this channel? Well, not exactly. There are still a few things I've yet to cover, such as the nature of the Master Emerald and Dark Gaia. I also have a super secret project coming up soon regarding the Ancients. If any of that sounds interesting to you at all, consider... Thank you all for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!